What if everything you think you know about history is wrong? From classroom legends to pop culture lies, some stories just stuck.
Let them eat
It's
cake.
time to break the spell. This is Myths We Believe, Volume 1.
We call them the Dark Ages, 1,000 years of mud, ignorance and fear. Right? Wrong. The Middle Ages weren't dark. They were different. Start in the 9th century. While Viking raids rocked Europe, Muslim scholars in Baghdad were mapping the stars and translating Greek philosophy. They called it Beit al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. Meanwhile, monks in France were inventing eyeglasses. University students in Bologna debated law and medicine centuries before Harvard existed. And in Germany, a man named Gutenberg, he didn't invent the printing press from scratch. He refined medieval innovations in movable type. Even the phrase Dark Ages didn't come from the Middle Ages. It was coined in the 1600s by Enlightenment thinkers who needed to cast shadows behind them to feel enlightened. And those Gothic cathedrals? They weren't grim. They were skyscrapers of stained glass, built to bend light like sermons. The truth? History isn't a light switch. It's a stained glass window, bright in places, broken in others, but never fully dark. Napoleon Bonapart, tiny tyrant, right? Wrong. He stood around 5'6", average for a Frenchman in the early 1800s. The myth that he was unusually short? It's not history, it's propaganda. British cartoonists exaggerated his size to humiliate him, and a translation error didn't help. 5 pieds 2 pouces in French meant 5'6" in English, but early English readers took it as 5'2". It stuck, because Napoleon wasn't small in what mattered. He rewrote battlefield tactics, crowned himself emperor, and scared the crowned heads of Europe into forming 7 coalitions against him. So yes, he loomed large, and if the British needed to shrink him in ink, that says more about them than about him. The truth? Napoleon didn't fall short, he just stood in the way. Big beards, fur cloaks, horned helmets. That's the Viking look, right? Wrong. Real Vikings, those Norse raiders of the 9th and 10th centuries, wore simple iron or leather helmets. Most didn't wear any at all. No horns, no spikes. Just utility. So where did the horns come from? Not archaeology. Opera. In the 1800s, a German costume designer gave Wagner's Viking warriors massive horned helmets. Dramatic, theatrical, unforgettable. And the myth stuck. It marched from stage to storybooks, from football teams to Halloween aisles. But real Vikings, they weren't costumed villains. They were shipbuilders, traders and warriors navigating the North Atlantic in open boats. They left no horned helmets behind. Only sagas and graves filled with tools, weapons and simple helmets. Sometimes the best way to mythologize the past is to give it horns. But the truth? Vikings didn't need horns to be legendary. You've heard it 100 times. The Great Wall of China. The only man-made object visible from space. It sounds epic, but it's false. From low orbit, the wall blends into the landscape. From the moon, you can't even see cities. So where did the myth come from? Old textbooks, 1930s newspapers. People guessed it must be visible before we ever left the ground. Even astronauts, once we finally reached space, tried to confirm it, but they came back with the same answer. Nope, the wall is long, yes, but it's narrow and built from the same stone and soil that surrounds it. It vanishes into the terrain like a scar into skin. Ironically, what you can see from space. City lights, airports, even highways, if the lighting's right. The Great Wall is still a wonder. It just wasn't built to shine from orbit. Sometimes the biggest myths are just too small to see. In 1492, Columbus sailed west to prove the Earth was round. Right? Wrong. By then, scholars had known the Earth was round for nearly 2,000 years. Back in 240 BE, Eratosthenes measured the planet's circumference using nothing but a stick, a shadow, and some math. Columbus didn't challenge a flat Earth, he just misjudged the size of the round one. He thought Asia was a few weeks west of Spain. He was wrong by thousands of miles. And he nearly ran out of food and patience before land finally appeared. Luckily for him, the Americas were in the way. So no, Columbus didn't prove the Earth was round. He proved he had no idea how big it was. And the people already living in the New World, they didn't need discovering. We think we know what happened in Salem: witches, trials, flames. But no one was burned at the stake in Salem. 19 people were hanged. One, Giles Corey, was pressed to death with stones, not fire, weight. The idea of witch burnings comes from Europe, where tens of thousands were burned over centuries. But in colonial Massachusetts, executions were by rope. Still, the terror was real. Hysteria swept the town, children cried, "Witch!" Neighbors turned on neighbors, and the court accepted spectral evidence, ghost stories, as proof. Within months, dozens were dead or imprisoned. Then, silence. The trials ended as quickly as they began, and Salem, ashamed, stayed quiet for a long time. Today we remember the flames, but the real horror was colder than that. Even Einstein failed math. Sounds comforting, but it's not true. By age 12, Einstein was already working through calculus. He didn't struggle with numbers, he clashed with rigid school systems. So where did the myth come from? A mistranslation. German schools graded on a reverse scale, so when a 1 meant excellent, English readers thought it meant failure. Then the myth spread, because it's useful. We like thinking geniuses stumble too. But Einstein, he wasn't slow. He was just ahead of the curriculum. Later at Princeton, he was still scribbling equations while others were still trying to catch up. So the next time someone tells you Einstein failed math, just smile. He didn't fail math, he just redefined the curve. We've all heard it. Chameleons change color to blend in with their surroundings. But that's not actually why they do it. Yes, chameleons can adjust their colors, but not like shape-shifting cloaks. Most changes are about temperature regulation, mood, and social signaling. Get too hot, turn pale to reflect the sun. Angry? Flash bold colors to warn a rival. Trying to attract a mate. It's less hide me and more look at me. Only a few species use background matching for camouflage, and even then, it's limited. So why do we still believe the invisibility trick? Blame cartoons. For decades, kids' books and animations turned chameleons into disappearing artists. It stuck. Because the myth is simple, but the truth, it's chemistry, biology, and behavior, all wrapped in scales. In nature, what looks like magic usually has a reason, and it's way cooler than the myth. Ever heard this one? Toilets flush clockwise in the US and counterclockwise in Australia because of the Coriolis effect. It sounds sciencey. It's also wrong. The Coriolis force does affect hurricanes, yes, on a planetary scale. It's why storms spin different directions north and south of the equator. But toilets? They're too small. The spin of your flush depends on the shape of the bowl, the angle of the water jets, and your plumbing, not your hemisphere. So why do people believe it? Because it sounds neat, like the Earth is so perfectly tuned it controls your toilet. But no, your bowl doesn't obey global physics, just plumbing and pressure. The myth was flushed into pop culture decades ago, thanks to cartoons, science museums, and more than one smug traveler. But it's time to set the record straight. No matter which way it spins, it's not Coriolis. It's just the toilet. Let them eat cake, the phrase that made Marie Antoinette the villain of the French Revolution. But she never said it. The quote, "Qu'ils mangent de la brioche," was written decades earlier by philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and he was quoting an unnamed princess, not the French queen. When the revolution came, Marie became an easy target. Austrian-born, extravagantly dressed, and hopelessly out of touch. So revolutionaries needed a line to summarize her privilege. They gave her one. It stuck. Never mind that she donated to charity, or that there's no record of her saying anything like it. The myth worked because it was simple. A woman with towering wigs and diamond necklaces must have said something awful. But history is messier. Marie Antoinette lost her head literally under the guillotine in 1793. But the quote, "That was someone else's fiction,"